Assalamu alaikum, everybody. My name is Noor Yazdani. I'm an Education USA advisor at the Lahore office. So before we begin, I'd like to introduce Dr. Eman Afroze, who has taken our time to speak about her experience USMLE and the residency process and being an NMD in the United States. Before we begin and we start with the Q&A session, I'd like to start with sharing a little bit of information about who we are and what we do as an organization. United States Education Foundation in Pakistan is essentially a binational commission between the governments of Pakistan and the United States. We administer a bunch of different scholarship programs, such as the Fulbright and the Global U Grad and a bunch of others. We basically help students in coming up with, we walk them through the entire US college application process. We work with them on a one-on-one basis to find a university that fits their situation and circumstances. Education USA is essentially housed within USCFP, but we are part of the US Department of State. We are your source for anything and everything to do with US higher education. We provide accurate, current, and unbiased information on US higher education. We have a bunch of different services that we provide. We have a bunch of different free in-house sessions, virtual sessions such as this one today. We have a library which our registered students can access for preparing their tests, such as SAT or the GRE. Our most famous service is still the one-on-one advising. So it's completely free of charge. So you have nothing to lose. Sign up with us today. And this is the email address where you can reach out to us if you have any questions later on. And without further ado, let's talk more about the USMLE. And once again, thank you so much, Dr. Eman, for being here. I'd like to, if you could please start with introducing yourself.
Hi, thank you for having me here. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Eman Afroze. And for the purposes of this seminar, and other purposes as well, of course, I am a doctor. I'm currently working in Michigan in the US, and I just started my intern there. So hi, happy to be here.
Thank you for your time, and thank you for waking up at such an odd hour for this session. So let's start with talking about step one. How long was this process, and how did you study for step one?
The answer to that is going to be very individual based on who the person is. It varies for everybody. What most people I've seen around me do is that they'll start step one prep at some point in their during their MBBS, and then they'll give it either once they've graduated final year, or once they've started a house job, or they'll do a little bit of house job and they'll start doing it in the middle. So it's really a very individual answer on how long and when, because it takes a lot of active, dedicated time to sit and study for it. But the emphasis on step one has decreased. It used to be scored beforehand. Now it's pass fail. When it was scored, people would study a lot more for it because, well, it was a numerical score. You had to do well in order to, for it to matter. Because if it didn't, then it really hurt, it hurt your chances if you didn't do well in it. Now it's pass fail. You either pass it or you fail it. They have increased the score threshold to be able to pass it, but what that means is that it is slightly harder to pass it, but at the same time, it shouldn't be that much harder for people to do it. But there are certain caveats to it. Number one being that a lot of what you do for step one carries on to step two. So before I tell people generally how to prep for it, and the average amounts of time people take, there's one thing I like to point out, that please don't take it not as seriously because it's not scored anymore. I know it's pass fail, and nobody really knows what score you get. And I've heard rumors of program directors or other people actually finding out what the score is, and you're the only person who doesn't know. No, that doesn't happen. It's just pass fail. Nobody knows your actual score, and the programs that when you do end up applying, they'll know whether you passed or you failed as well. Nobody else knows. So yeah, so that is it. And then there are certain things that you need to know. First of all, like I already mentioned, it carries on to step two a lot. So your base for step one is going to be what you're going to carry into step 2. I have seen this a lot of times that people who don't do well in step 1 because of a lack of prep. If it was something else, like you didn't really understand the questions or something else, and then something else. But if there was a lack of actual knowledge and you were deficient on that, then that's an issue, because it's going to hurt you in step 2 as well. So yeah, I can't stress this enough to please take it seriously, even though it's not like a numerical score anymore. Time, a lot of people take 6 months. I took less than that time because I wasn't working when I took it. So I had more dedicated time, but my suggestion would be that while I can't give you an exact time period, because again, everybody's circumstances are different. Some people are working, some are not. But my suggestion would be to not, do it in broken up chunks. The worst thing you can do is start prep, then stop it, then start it and stop it. Please don't do that. That just, because one, it's really hard to build momentum. And then two, once you start going ahead with stuff and then you put a break in the middle, you kind of tend to forget a lot of it. So that's one advice I can get. So for prep material, of course, this goes for all step exams, whether it's step 1, 2, or 3. UWorld, the question bank, is the gold standard resource that everybody uses. You cannot go in and give an exam without it. I like to joke that, I've given the UWorld website a lot of my money, but of course you can't really do anything without it. So it's a certain number of questions, and the way we're used to profs and exams in Pakistan is very, very different from the step exams. We would have MCQs and then we would have the other questions, but the MCQs were nowhere as hard as these. So it's definitely conceptual, and I will just say this is well over here right now, that how well you understand the language also matters, because there's a set amount of time that you get, and it's not a lot, in which you have to read a big question, then you have to go through the lab values, go through the options. So having command on the language is certainly something that's important. That doesn't mean you have to be really good at it. All that means is that your understanding has to be good. Like, there shouldn't be an issue, and I'm sure most people here wouldn't already have that issue. So where you start off with prep also depends on how your basic sciences knowledge was in med school. So step 1 is basic sciences. So if you were strong in that in med school, then maybe you need less prep than somebody who wasn't. So there are certain resources for that. If you wasn't as good and you don't want to start off with UWorld directly, then there's either Kaplan, but I personally do not recommend Kaplan. I think it's a waste of time. It's very long. Unless you need a lot of help with basic sciences, I wouldn't recommend it. So Boards and Beyond is another resource. They're basically videos on all systems and topics, and they're not super long. They're well structured. They're very to the point. I would really recommend those. Those are really good. And of course, I forgot to mention first aid. It's the book that you use for step 1. So if you need a refresh on basic sciences, which a lot of us tend to do as we go up in our years, the first thing to do would be to take your Boards and Beyond videos and then study them along with your first aid. First aid as a book doesn't make a lot of sense unless you have something else explaining it. So do that and then go through the questions, and that's how you build on your knowledge. Once you feel like you've done a sufficient portion or chunk of UWorld, which is the question bank, that's when you start doing your practice tests and see where you stand. And those are very, very important, because in practice exams, that basically tells you how you do with time management, how you do with understanding the actual question, because what they'll do is they'll tend to put in a lot of red herrings, and that's your job, to actually identify the question and not go after, something that they're wanting you to go off on and get a wrong answer. So that comes with practice, and that's why practice tests are so important. And what I would do is, towards the end of my prep, a practice test every week, like one day of the week was simply for a practice test. That's NBME exams. NBME does the practice exams, and then UWorld, a UWorld subscription itself comes with 2 practice exams as well. So you have those, and those are the practice exams you would take and see how you go, and then and then you do the actual scheduling and you book your exam and you go and take it. So yeah, once again, it's not scored anymore, but please don't take it lightly because it's going to be the basis for your step 2.
Thank you so much for this information. And what you mentioned that, could you please elaborate a bit more on the changes that have been made when it comes to step 2?
The biggest change is going to be on how important it's become. When step 1 was scored, step 2 score, of course, it still mattered, but didn't matter as much. Now it's basically the main score that programs will use to differentiate you between other applicants. There are other things as well that they check, of course, your graduation date, how many research or electives you have. And this is going to be, variable from program to program. But there's one thing, if that's everybody's going to look at, it's going to be the step 2 score. So, so changes wise, it's just that the emphasis on it has become a lot more. And then there are more things like screenings, like so these things don't, because step 2 is about clinical knowledge, not your basic sciences. There's things like screenings, like, for example, lung cancer or whatever. So things like that, and then vaccines, and which are, they're not new, but they start asking more of them. So that's like the changes in them. But other than that, it's mostly the emphasis that's more on it.
And how would you say that, how does this, for your step 2, pass fail versus an American number, how does that impact the process?
Step 2 is just a numerical score, and step 1 is the one that's pass fail. What's that done is that you now have a less chance of showing yourself as a stellar applicant. It does take off the pressure of having to do super well in step 1, but at the same time, the pressure is still there with step 2. You have to do well in step 2 for programs to consider you. And with every passing year, it's getting more and more competitive. It's not going to get any easier. It's just going to get harder. So if you want to stand out, then of course, apart from, US clinical experience or maybe research or other things, step 2 score really matters, where you can actually say and show that, this shows that I'm a capable applicant. Step 3 is also scored, but step 3 is not really needed for you to apply. So that's number 1. And then, to be honest, step 3 score doesn't hold as much weightage as step 2 does. Not by a mile. Step 2 is way, way more important.
And for step 3, would you recommend, when would you recommend when to time your step 3, during residency or after residency?
You have to take it during residency. You can't take it after.
Oh, okay.
But a lot of people tend to take it before you apply. Again, it's dependent on your circumstances, because to take step 3, you have to be physically present in the US. It's a 2-day exam. Now this is UWorld and CCS cases. CCS cases is basically they'll give you a case of somebody, and you're not just giving medical knowledge, you're also, for example, telling them to put an IV access, or, like basic things that you do for each patient, you'll be doing those as well. So it's more of like a computer software that you got to learn, but that's important. Step 3 does help in applying. It's more relevant if your graduation date is more than 5 years, or if you have an older graduation date. If it's not the case that, you're a recent graduate, then, while it still will help, maybe it's not as important, because most programs, they do think that their residents, when they come in, they'll give it, and it's different for every program. The specialty I'm in is internal medicine. It's a 3-year specialty, and most programs require you to have taken it by the end of the first or the second year. Again, that's variable between programs, but the point is that they're usually okay with people taking it during residency, so you don't have to take it before. But if you do, then it's a plus point for sure.
Thank you so much for this. And when are you eligible to apply for residency?
So in the past, what used to happen was that if people had a really high step 1 score and they hadn't taken step 2, they would go ahead and apply anyway. And they take step 2 late. Of course, this is not the majority. Technically, you're eligible to apply, when you've graduated, but you shouldn't apply. I mean, it's a lot of time, money, effort that goes into this process. So the best thing to do would be to, have taken your step 1, have taken your step 2, have your entire application, everything ready. And that's when you apply. And this requires some planning, because the date for the application deadline. They tell that beforehand every single year. I believe this year it's the 27th of September, if I'm not mistaken. It changes a little bit every year, but it's around the same benchmark in September. Mid to late September is when it usually is. So before your application goes out, you should have your step 1 score report, your step 2 score report, all your electives, LORs, everything should be ready, and that's when you can apply. So that's what I was pointing out in the beginning, that while you can apply with just a step 1 score, in the past that some people used to do that if they had super high scores, it's not recommended anymore, because step 1 is only pass fail now. And number 2, it's kind of a waste of money. Nobody's going to look at your application now if you don't have a step 2 score within your application. So and the later you apply, the worse it is, because for example, if it's 27 September this year, then you want to make sure that you've submitted your application, you've done everything before that time. Some people do apply late and they still match, but they usually tend to get fewer interviews, because you really hurt your chances by doing that. I'm not saying it's impossible to still match and get interviews. It's very much possible, but at the same time, it really hurts your chances, because some programs, and again, this is program variable, they will download applications only on the first day when application deadline is there. So on September 27th, and the average IM program gets about 5,000 applications. This is so that's a lot, and they'll have anywhere from 7 to 8 spots. My program is different; it's bigger, but on an average, they have 7 to 8 spots and they have 5,000 applications. So on average, at least. So if you're going to be applying late, what's to say that they're going to re-download your application? A lot of times they won't do that. And they'll just choose from the pool that they have already. So, and other programs, they will go back and re-download more applications, but there's really no way of telling. So the best way to help yourself and your chances is to apply on time.
And how expensive is the entire application process?
It's expensive. It's really expensive. There's no caveats about that. Of course, the step exams themselves are expensive. I believe it's about $1,000 for every step 1 and step 2 application fee. And then of course, all the resources I mentioned. UWorld is around, for 6 months, I believe, is around $500 for both step 1 and step 2. So it is expensive. And then there are other application prep materials that you can either choose to spend your money or not spend your money on. And that's entirely up to you. But at the very least, you will, of course, apply for the exam and you will get UWorld. Some people do offline UWorld, but unless it's it's something that's online UWorld is not a possibility for you at all, I would advise against it, because then you don't really know how well you're doing overall and what subjects and systems you're weak in. And then when it comes to the actual application process, an average IMG applies to at least 100 programs. And I know that most people apply between 150 to 200 programs, because as IMGs, we do have to apply widely. So if you are going to be applying widely, and that's going to be almost all of us, then it's going to cost a lot of money. So for the first, when you do apply for, the application, it's $99. And that's just the typical ERAS application fee that's going to go anyway. And in that, you get 10 programs that you don't have to pay extra money for. So the first 10 programs are going to be the $99 that you're going to pay anyway. After that, it goes on, it increases and increases. So between 11 to 20 programs, it's going to be $19 each. And then as you go further, so 21 to 30 programs is going to be 23. I actually have it open because, I've gotten a little bit. It's 23 programs and $23 each. And then 31 programs or more is $27 each. So basically, American graduates don't apply to as many programs as we do at all. So this module, this system is basically there because they don't want people to apply to too many programs, because it increases the applications by a lot, and then programs have to sift through them. So it is expensive. You can do the math if you're going to do 100 programs and how much that cost you based on this. Is actually a residency fee calculator application process. If you just Google ERAS residency fee calculator and we put the stuff in, then it'll tell you how much it's going to cost. And I understand that it's a big concern these days, especially with, the conversion rate and the dollar to rupee ratio, and, it's going downhill a lot. So it's a very, very valid concern. And you're definitely going to need either familial help, maybe a spouse, maybe if you're working and you've been saving up. If you don't have any sources of external help, the best thing you can do for yourself is to pre-plan and save. The process to actually getting residency in the US, it's long, it's tiring, it's emotionally draining. I know I've had breakdowns while doing it, and almost everybody I knew did. So, that's to be expected, but, and it's also expensive. And then at the end, there are no, you won't know for sure. There are no sureties. Nobody's going to guarantee you if you're going to match or not. So that's something that I'm sure anybody listening who's interested already knows, that, you don't have guarantees, but if you do end up matching, then it's really worth it. So, yeah, it is an expensive process. So looking at the finances is something that I suggest everybody who's looking to apply, that's something that you should try to figure out early on, because if you don't, then, well, you have to pay for it some way or the other, right? So.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. So what happens if you don't match? Do you pay all the fee again? Do you have is there a time limit before you can reapply? How does that work?
So the match cycle is every year, and I believe ERAS opens mid-June, May, something like that. And then application deadline is around September, mid to late September every single year. So if you don't match 1 year, you can always reapply. And yes, you'll have to pay not the exam fee, because you've already taken the exams, but the application fee, you'll have to do that all over again. So yes, which is why most people, well, other reasons as well, that you don't want to put gap years and you don't want to delay your career anymore. But if you don't match, then yes, you have to pay everything all over again. And of course, it's ideal that you match within your first try. But if you don't, I know of so many people who haven't matched within the first attempt, but then they've, in the next cycle, they've applied and they've matched. And basically, it's kind of like a self-reflection process where you see what you've actually not done when you applied the first time and what you want to change. So for example, if it was lack of research, then you make sure that, you have research when you apply the second time. Don't just reapply with no changes in your CV, because that's going to not help you at all. That's actually going to look bad that you had an entire year and you made no changes, no improvement. So if you're going to be reapplying, what programs want to see are that in that 1 year, you did something to improve your CV. You either had more clinical experience, US clinical experience. So either electives, observerships. Observerships aren't technically US clinical experience, but they still count. My point is that you did something, or you did research, or you took step 3. I mean, the score is not something you can do anything about. Once it's there, it's there. But the things that you can change, you did something for them. So yes, you can certainly reapply. I have a lot of success stories of people matching on the second attempt. At the same time, there are heartbreaks as well. Certainly there are people who don't match the second time around as well. So nobody can predict that for you, but in the unfortunate event that you don't match the first time, please don't lose hope. So many people have, and you can as well.
Thank you so much for this. How different is our Pakistani MBBS compared to the US MLE prep? How different is the curriculum and the examination taking process?
Very different. Very, very, very different. So the prof we take, the MCQs aren't hard at all, especially when you compare them to, of course, I mean, in comparison to the step exams, like it's not even the same ball game. And there are no actual written things, it's just MCQs. So yeah, it's very, very different. It's a very long exam. Step 1 is, I believe, 8 hours, 9 hours. I'm forgetting. Step 2 is 9 or 10. It's just an hour longer than step 1. But yeah, so it's very different. MBBS is very different because, we used to focus on past papers, and that's something while you're doing MBBS, you have to do. You can't not look at past papers, because then you're going to end up hurting yourself in prof exams, right? So it's definitely needed for that, time period. But when it comes to the step exams, really understanding is everything. Understanding, of course, medicine has two things, right? You need to understand what's going on, and then you need to learn some things as well. Without that, you're not getting anywhere. But there's more understanding for the step exams, I'd say. And then you really need to know your pathophysiology, how disease works. And then there's this thing called test taking strategies that I'd want to emphasize on. When they write an exam, in a question stem, there's going to be clues that point you to the actual problem that the question is asking for, and they're going to be outliers that are going to skew you into the wrong side. So it's up to you to read, and this is something that comes with practice. And you'll practice, you'll get questions wrong, you'll know. So you make that mistake once, and hopefully the hope is that you don't make it again. So yeah, so it's very different in terms of how we prep for it, and it's also different in terms of time. Our exams were not this long at all. So even taking the exam is a beast in itself, because you have one block, it's an hour long, and then you have a total of 8 blocks, I believe, or 9 blocks for step 2. Sorry, it's been a while that I've given them. But anyway, my point is, those are long exams, and you only have an hour of break. An hour break, if you skip the tutorial in the beginning, which I mean, you can easily skip, it's not rocket science. It just tells you how to maneuver the software, which is the exact same as an NBME practice exam. So if you've taken an NBME practice exam, then the tutorial isn't something that you should have any issues with skipping. So once you skip that, more break time gets added. So you have to manage your break time. You have to again, this is going to be dependent on the person, but I used to take a break after every block. And then basically finish a block, and then I'd go out, take a sip of water. I had a protein bar with me, or any bar really. Take a couple of bites of that, just sit for a couple minutes, go back in. That's what I used to do. That's what worked for me personally. This might not work for you. Some people do 2 blocks and then take a longer break. So again, it's really up to you, but you have to manage your time. And you have to, of course, medical knowledge, of course, is everything, but test taking strategies. There's a really good article that right now I do not have on the top of my head, but I can certainly give the link to Noor. That's about test taking strategies and how to improve on those. And she can either post them somewhere or let you guys know about them. And if that's something you struggle with, then that should help.
Thank you so much for this information. Can you shed a little bit more light on the residency program? How long are those typically? And what does compensation in terms of salary looks like? And if one person can sustain themselves on that income?
Sure. So first of all, the number of years is going to be specially dependent. The most common ones for IMGs are internal medicine and family medicine, but internal medicine is way more IMGs go into that. So I would want to say 3 years for both, yes. And then fellowship, if you want to do something in the future, then fellowship is also going to add years. So most fellowships like GI cardio are 3 years, some like endo are 2 years. So, but residency in itself, IM and FM is 3 years. And while you're doing it, sounds like a lot, but really, time flies, time always flies. So there's that. And then in terms of compensation, because inflation is everywhere in the US and in the world. In the past, it used to be around the $50,000 a year mark, but now because of the inflation, my God, I meant inflation. It's increased. It's around, I think for most programs now, from what I remember when I was applying, the first year they give around $58,000 to $59,000 a year, and I'm not saying that you can live like a king on it. No, you can't. But because of course you'll have taxes taken out of that money. It's not, you're not getting the entire money by yourself. And then once taxes come out and you get the actual paycheck, then rent and all of that. But I do feel like, and because I am in Ann Arbor, close to Michigan, University of Michigan, so it's an expensive area to live in. But still I have, I can talk about, I mean, I'm not single, I have my husband with me. So we have 2 incomes, so it's different for us. But for people who are sustaining themselves on the one salary, definitely yes, doable. They do pay you enough for you to sustain yourself, even if you're just the one person. And as you know, in your second year, your salary does increase, not by a whole lot, but it does by 2 to 3 thousand, and then in the third year it will increase even more by another 2 to 3 thousand. If you decide to do fellowship, then it's going to increase even more. If you don't and you decide this is it, I don't want to do anything else, and you know, either become a primary care or hospitalist, then of course then your salary increases by a lot. But just during residency, it's enough to sustain yourself. Yes.
Thank you. Is there any language test that is required for your application process when it comes to applying for residencies?
Yes, OET. CS was cancelled. The clinical skills exam was cancelled permanently. And the replacement for that is the pathways and OET. You need to apply for one pathway. The details for that, if you Google them, they'll come out. And you know, if you've already finished your house job, then I believe it's pathway one that you qualify for. If not, then you know, there are a whole bunch of other ones that you qualify for, and you can always, you know, look at which one. And if you don't qualify for any, then pathway 6 is going to be the one you use. So it's not like there's going to be no pathway for you. There's one for everybody. And then OET is it's not just English language, it's English language that's relevant to the to our field. And then you have to take that and you have to pass that. So it's listening, speaking, and writing, and you need to get a certain amount of score in all three of those. And yeah, the score for OET does not matter at all, just passing it does.
Okay, thank you. How has your experience been as a resident, working in a hospital as a resident? How has your experience been?
Okay, so yeah, of course it's tiring. You won't find a resident that's not tired, and this is true for every place. But when so the way again, every program is structured different. The way my program works is that on some months we're on floors. Floors is what we call wards in Pakistan. So floor months are harder because you don't get a lot of days off. You get 1 day of the week off, and it's usually a 4-week rotation, and it's a lot more work. The inpatient side is always going to be more stressful. We know that, right? So on those, it gets really tiring, and I know I tend to become, you know, a zombie when I'm on those months. But on clinic months, it's fine, it's good. On elective months, it's good. And then my program does clinic months only. So some programs will have you take 1 or 2 days of the week as a clinic day. My program doesn't do that. It makes you do a clinic month, which is better because then, in my opinion, because one, you have a set amount of time that you're on clinic, and then 2, you get weekends off. And weekends off really does improve your quality of living a lot, to be honest. But that's to be expected. Training anywhere, especially in the US, is going to be hard. The surgery residents, the OB, other fields have it a lot worse than IM does. Of course, there's certain chiller residencies as well. But on the whole, residency is a place where you're going to be training, so you are going to be working hard. And my experience has been good so far, alhamdulillah. But you know, just come with the mindset of, inshallah, if you do much, to work hard and to learn the most that you can, because this is the only time that you're going to be working. You have your own license, of course, but it's an educational, it's a limited license. And it's basically the doctor you're attending's license that you're going to be working under. After that, it's your neck on the line. Basically, that's what I'm trying to say. But it should be the time when you're learning the most. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for this. And can you please shed some light on job markets? How easy or how hard it is to find one once you're done with your residency program?
Depends on specialty and what you end up doing. So I'll talk about IM because that's the most common one. That's the one I'm doing. So IM is, like I said, a 3-year residency. If you decide to not do fellowship, then you have 2 options. You can either do primary care, which is kind of like a general practitioner, and you can do hospitalist, which is basically people who will manage people who are admitted to floors and then look at them and manage them and they're discharged. They'll do all of that stuff. So primary care is typically, you know, a 4 or a 5-day work week. And then you have weekends off. Hospitalist is 7 days on and 7 days off. These are typical schedules. Of course, it can actually vary between regions and areas, but this is a typical schedule. So in hospitalist, you only work 2 weeks out of the year, but that said, those 2 weeks are, it sounds amazing. I know that you only have to work half the time, but it's actually really demanding. So so those are the two options for you, and the job markets for both of those are really good, especially as primary care, because primary care, there is a shortage of primary care in the US right now. So jobs for primary care are definitely, there should be no issue for you finding a job in primary care. Then if you go on to the fellowships, then that really varies on what you end up doing. For example, if it's GI that you're doing, then GI is also short in a lot of areas. So basically it's a supply and demand thing. If you are in an area, for example, if you're in New York where there's an excess of doctors, then one, you're going to be paid less as compared to somebody who's in a not so desirable area, like the South, for example, the rural area in the South of the US. You're going to be paid less than if you're in New York as compared to the South, you're going to be paid less. But then job market, while you will still end up getting jobs, really job market is an issue for, I think right now, for people who are going into emergency medicine. That is the one specialty where jobs have been hard to come by. Other than that, job market is good. The healthcare field, especially being a doctor, comes here with a lot of job security. So job market isn't something I would worry about unless you want to go into emergency medicine. Then maybe, even then, not everybody's going to have trouble finding a job, but it can be harder, yes.
What would you recommend for Pakistani students? Maybe what tips or what would you recommend for them to, should they take their step one while they are enrolled in MBBS program or after that? And even not just in terms of like what would you recommend? How should they prepare or think about preparing for their first step, which is the step one?
I think that if you can give it during MBBS, then that would be the best case scenario. The reason why I say that is because step one prep takes time. Then you have to give step two as well. Of course, that takes time as well. So right after you finish your MBBS, you have house job, right? And house job is a stressful time. You don't have a lot of time. So right now, MBBS is going to be the most free time you have anyway. I'm not saying you're free. Of course, you have to go to college or wherever you are, in a university, college, wherever. So you have to go to, and you have to study, and you have profs and everything. So yeah, you have to do all of that, but still this is going to be the most free you're going to be, assuming that you're going to do house job. If you're not going to do house job, it's a different story. But if you plan early on and you give your step one, I'd say maybe within the third or the fourth year. Well, if you give it, say, within the fourth year, and you clear it, and then in the fifth year, you kind of start prepping for step two. And then once you're done with profs, you take that dedicated time to just sit down and prep for step two. If that's something you can do, that's an ideal time, because then what that's going to mean is that your year of graduation is going to be really good. An old graduate is considered somebody who's 5 years out of med school. But the more competitive it's getting, and it's getting more competitive as the years go on, every year is going to be a harder math cycle. And so now, when I was applying, the overreaching thing that I saw was that almost all programs wanted, when I say all, I mean a majority, not all, but a majority of programs wanted you to be within 3 years of graduation. So if you time it well and you take step one, say end of third year or mid fourth year, and then you take your step two after you're done with prof, say 4 to 5 months after you're done with prof, 4 to 5, 6 months, then that puts you in a good position to for a year of graduation wise. And that's definitely, it gives you an edge because the less your year of graduation is, and you're not an old graduate, the better it is. And then if there's one more piece of advice I can give is to be proactive in med school in terms of extracurriculars, if there's something you can do, because those also count in your applications, if there are any interesting hobbies that you have. And then of course US clinical experience. I know it's easier said than done, because for that you have to actually be in the US, and you have to find a rotation, you have to spend money on a ticket, accommodation, actual living, everything. But so it is hard, and I won't comment on it because I don't know everybody's personal circumstances. But if that's something you can do, then I would recommend it, yes, because it helps a lot. Because once you're a medical student, you can do electives. Once you graduate, you can't do electives anymore, and then the only thing you can do is externships, and those are much harder to come by. So once you graduate, you can either do observerships, which are not considered US clinical experience by a majority of programs, or you can do externships. Externships are the same as electives, they're just for graduates. Those are harder to come by than electives, so that's going to be my tips. That
And students,
plan ahead.
thank you so much. So for students who want to go for their residency program, or who want to, take step 2 there, what visa would they be eligible for?
For step exams, I believe it's a B1 or B2. To be honest, I'm not really super familiar with these. But if you mean, and you said residency for visas for residency as well, that's going to be a J1 or an H1B. H1B is not the most common one. J1 is the most common, one that's used. If your visa requiring, which is going to be most of us, then there are certain things that come with it, because there are less programs you can apply to. Not all programs sponsors visas. A lot of programs don't, but at the same time, a lot of my program, for example, does sponsor visas. So of course, this is something when you're applying, when you're researching programs, you look at what program does H1B, what does J1. So that's something you do while you apply. But if you get the J1, then you do 3 years of residency on the J1. For example, if within those 3 years you travel back to, for example, you travel back to Pakistan to meet family, then you have to get it renewed. And then that's just something you should know. And then there's a thing called, if you want to stay in the US. So the J1 visa, what is it? It basically says that I'm just going to be in this country for this certain amount of time. I'm only here to train, and then I'll go back to my home country. Almost nobody goes back, to be honest with you. And then what people do is they'll do a J1 waiver, which is that they'll do 3 years of work as a physician in an underserved area in the US. And that counts as your waiver. And then, that's one step closer to, a green card, and then eventually a citizenship. It's a long process, but really the main thing is matching and getting through residency. If you're able to do that, then you'll find a J1 waiver. There is no shortage of underserved areas in the US where they need doctors. So you'll just basically have to do 3 years of that. And after that, you have more freedom in terms of choosing where you want to eventually work.
Thank you so much for this. So would you say that USMLE is more like an aptitude as well as a knowledge-based test?
It's both. Knowledge, definitely, and aptitude as well. Your test taking strategies, how good you are with time management. It's really everything. Because, for example, if your knowledge is good but you're not good at time management, or you're not good at test taking strategies, then you probably won't end up scoring well, which is, the exams are the first step. So it's a bit of everything, to be honest.
And can you please give some tips for students on the day of the test?
On the day of the test. So on the day of the test, first things first, sleep. Make sure you sleep well. I know, easier said than done, because you're nervous. I had a hard time sleeping as well for both exams, but I did manage to get enough sleep still. So if you can tire yourself out the previous day, so these exams, they're a marathon, they're not a race. You prep for them for a long time, and then you won't really get much out of cramming the last day. So I'm not saying don't study on the last day, because I did. I did things that I thought were high yield, I didn't do them. But then towards the end of the day, mid to end, just tire yourself out, go jog, exercise, do something that is going to get you physically tired, so you're going to have an easier time sleeping. Can't emphasize on the sleep part enough, because you need your brain to work during the exam. And then, of course, wake up early, pray, because that helps. If that's something that you do typically, then definitely pray. And then good breakfast, make sure you have enough coffee, make sure you take enough snacks with you. I took quite a lot, didn't end up using all of it, but I mean, you don't want to run out during, right? So and then I took things like, they do provide you, I took my exams in the US, so I'm not familiar with Prometric in Pakistan, but I did take my own earplugs anyway, in case I didn't like the ones that they had. They should have some, but I mean, I wanted to carry my own anyway. So those, and then carry some pens, wear comfortable loose clothing, because every time you're going to go out for a break and come back in, they're going to check you again. So you don't want, something with too many pockets as well. That because every time you're going to have to turn out the pocket, show them. So just be comfortable, show up in your PJs, nobody cares. If that means, if comfortable means that you're wearing sweatpants, so be it. As long as you're comfortable and you have your snacks with you, and you have your coffee with you or something to keep you. I know people who carried coffee beans with them, those chocolate dip coffee beans to help. So if that works for you, why not? Or energy drinks, or really anything to get you through the day. And the one thing I wouldn't recommend is a good breakfast, yes, but please don't have a big meal during the exam, because during the break, because then you're going to come down crashing after, we tend to feel sleepy after we have a big meal. So that's the last thing you want while you're taking the exam. So don't do that. If that's not something you'd normally do, I would definitely advise against it. And then afterwards, of course, go out, celebrate, eat, do whatever you want to. But carrying study material, you are allowed to carry your books and stuff with you. This is up to you. If you're the sort of person who likes to check in the little free time, break time that you have, sure, you can, but not probably the best strategy, because you're not going to change much. Because at that point, you're just like out for what, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. So at that point, the best thing would be to, if you think you've made a mistake, don't sweat it, don't overthink it. It's a long exam. You definitely are going to make mistakes. So just, move on, and don't lose your mindset. You need a certain game plan and mindset while you're giving the exam. And as long as you, keep focus, it should be fine.
And lastly, discrimination and inclusivity. How inclusive are these programs for foreign medical graduates, especially Pakistan? And how inclusive and how welcoming your specific program has been?
This is, again, I know I've said this a lot of times, but so many things are program dependent. So it's just something I have to say that depends on the program. The way you can usually tell if a program is inclusive and is to go to a program's website, look at their current and their past residents. One look, and you should be able to tell if the program is, diverse or not, just by the resident demographic, right? My particular program is a mix of IMGs and AMGs, so we're almost like a 50-50, I would say 55-60, something like that split. So it's almost split down the middle, at least my classes. And we're from all over. I'm from Pakistan. I have two other girls that are from Pakistan. One's from Peshawar, one's from Karachi. There are people from Mexico, Nigeria. There's somebody from Sudan, Syria. So there are people from Ecuador, from Philippines. There are my seniors. And then I'm the first year, so we have talking specifically about Pakistan. With 3 Pakistanis in my first year. Second year is just the one, and none in the third year. So what I'm saying is that it's a diverse program. They're very, very welcoming, and they're very, alhamdulillah, my experience has been really good because there's no discrimination. They're very welcoming. If it's generally an IMG friendly program, which are the ones that we tend to apply to more, then you in all probability shouldn't have this issue of discrimination. And again, that's also going to be something when you're working under certain doctors. For example, your program overall might be really good and might be welcoming, but one specific doctor in the program that you work with might be a little racist or something, right? So experiences vary, is what I'm trying to say. But alhamdulillah, I haven't encountered anything so far, nor have my fellow residents, especially because, like I said, it's a 50-50 split, so it is an IMG friendly program. Yeah, so we definitely do have people from Pakistan, but we do have people from all over, literally all over. India, Pakistan, Philippines, South America, so many other places. So yeah, it's just look at the resident demographic, and that usually gives you a better idea about whether the program is welcoming or not.
And what can you please shed some light on specialization after the residency program?
That is up to you, what field you're interested in. So I'll talk about IM and IM fellowships. So the main difference between FM and IM, and I know some people are, while the medical students are confused about it. So IM and FM is very similar, but still the differences mainly are that family medicine sees children as well. IM deals only with adults, and then family medicine will see pregnant women. And they're not, of course, OBGYNs, that's a different specialty, but they will do, for example, some normal deliveries. They won't do C-sections, but they'll do some normal deliveries. They'll maybe see a non-complicated pregnant woman throughout her pregnancy. It's decreasing less and less because more people want to go to the OBs as soon as they're pregnant anyway. Or more people who have children, they want to take their children to actual pediatricians than to family medicine doctor. But just in terms of scope, this is the difference. And then the second difference is fellowships. IM has a lot more fellowships. There's cardio, GI, hematology, oncology, pulm crit, endo, infectious disease, nephrology. And then what you want to do is going to be dependent on what your area of interest is, and then how good your program placement has been for fellowships as well, because that matters. For example, GI, cardio, hematology, oncology, pulm crit. These 4 fellowships are really competitive. It's hard to get into these. Then there's endocrine, which is in the middle. And then nephrology and infectious disease are kind of at the bottom. There are more as well, but I'm talking about the major ones right now. In terms of competitiveness, not, of course, nephrologists are super smart, but in terms of competitiveness, nephro and ID are at the bottom. So what you want to do is going to be dependent on your area of interest. And then also, if your program is typically one that has no history of matching people into GI or cardiology, then your chances of matching into GI or cardiology decrease by a lot. I'm not saying it's impossible, it's not. But to match into fellowship, during residency, you have to do research. If you want to go into a competitive specialty like the 4 ones I mentioned, then you're going to have to do a lot more research. And doing research during residency requires a lot of effort because you're already so busy anyway. So you're going to have to put in a lot more time and effort, but certainly people do it every year. There's no reason to say that you can't, but just something that if it's something like nephro ID, you're going to have to do a lot less. Maybe a poster is enough. And you don't have to do a lot for endo either. So yeah, fellowship is really just dependent on you, what you want to do, and how much time you're willing to commit and how much effort you're willing to commit with research and your program placement. So yeah.
And with that, thank you so much, Dr. Eman, for taking our time for the session. You had some great insight, and I'm sure students would attended the session. And we will put this up on your Facebook as well. So thank you so much for sharing your experience with us. And thank you to all those who attended this session. Stay tuned on our website, which is educationusa.pk, for future events. And thank you so much once again. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.